Hello and welcome back to Death and Taxes, your live stream podcast from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. I am one half of your hosting duo, John Humphreys, and joined, as always, by Gene Tunny. How you doing, Gene?
Going well, John. I think, yes, as always now. We've had a real streak this year, so, yeah, really happy about that and good to be catching up with you. There's been a lot going on this week we're going to talk about, and we've got a terrific guest today. So, yep, really looking forward to the conversation.
We do indeed. Good spoiler. Good thing there to get people on the hook. We've got Gideon Rozner joining us. You may remember him from his time as the chief comedian at the Institute of Public Affairs. I think policy director was the official title. But all-round good guy, good political commentator and scallywag. So he's come to join us and tell us where we're wrong somehow. Hopefully, be much more fun that way. So We've got Gideon coming up in a second. Topics for us to cover today. A pretty obvious political one. Matt Canavan, friend of the show, is now the National Party leader. So that's going to make things interesting. And he's already come up with some provocative new ideas. They're not new to him. They're new to some journalists. One of those we'll do a bit of a deep dive in, and that is the idea of income splitting or family tax. How should you tax the family? Which also brings us on to another politician who's had some tax ideas this week, Allegra Spender, Teal Independent. I'd say the least bad Teal. It's damning with faint praise, but I think that's a fair commentary. And she's come up with a tax proposal, some good, and some of it the exact opposite of what Matt Canavan wants to do. So we'll unpack that a little bit. We got anything else? And oil prices. That's worth unpacking. I was a little bit relaxed about the threat of fuel prices last week. I'm feeling a little less relaxed this week, so I'm going to endeavor to argue against my weak old self. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's what we got in front of us. But before we start, brought to you by the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. If you'd like to check out what we're doing or help us out, taxpayers.org.au. You can see the campaign, see what we're up to. And also on Substack, Oz Taxpayer, so AUS, taxpayer.substack.com. Can I ask you, if you're listening in, please go to the Substack, sign up. It's one short-ish email per week. We do not spam you, but then you can get involved in the conversation. Helps us to keep in touch with you. So please consider doing that. This is being simulcast to X, Facebook, and YouTube. So wherever you're watching it now, can I ask you, please give it a like. Please give it a share. Spin it around the algorithm. It helps the algorithm to know that this is the sort of thing that people should be watching. And wherever you are, please go and follow us on the other ones as well. Follow Jane and myself and Gideon on X. You can find the details in the show description below. So with that all out of the way, the one last thing that I shouldn't forget, this is live. You'll see our mistakes as we make them. Mostly my mistakes. I'm sure Gene and Gideon would never make a mistake, but you'll see them as we go. And we also take your questions. So please feel free to write them in. Sometimes we'll just show them as we're going. G'day, Lyndon. Good to see you again. And otherwise, we will get your cash away from the banks and government. There's something to unpack there. Maybe we'll do that at the end. Most of them will wait till the end. And once we have exhausted ourselves on our usual topics, we will go to you, dear listener, and respond to some of your questions, queries, comments, and based on last week, criticisms. Last week got a bit fun, Gene.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we copped it, didn't we, over various issues? So yes, that was good to see the engagement. I think that was one of the feistiest comment sections we've had. I thought it was brilliant. Good to see.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. We'll see if it happens again. We'll see what names we can be called this time. And we'll rope in Gideon to see what he can be called. Anyway, with that all done, having mentioned his name several times already, please welcome to the screen, Mr. Gideon Rozner. Gideon,
here I am. I'm fantastic. I like chief comedians, so yeah. No, I'm just I guess an amateur comedian or freelance comedian. So no, great to be podcasting again, guys. Thanks for having me.
Of course,
you're very welcome. And be careful, we may rope you back again. We'll see. We'll see how much you agree with us.
I got time.
Nothing but time. All right. Well, Gideon, I don't know if you're used to the way we do things around here, but once we've got all of that introductory malarkey out of the way, the first thing we usually dive into is Gene's Roundup, where I tell people at home, if you're normal, you probably don't follow economics. Why would you? Because you don't have to. You can ignore it all week. Come here for 10 minutes and Gene tells you everything you need to know from the last week of economics. With that said, Gene, do you want to take it away?
Yes, I will, John. Over the last week, I think most people would realise what's going on, though. I think the big economic news people are well aware of if they just look at the petrol prices at their local service station, $2.10 to $2.50, whatever, depending on the day that you've gone there, a litre. We've had this continuation of the rise in the oil price. So last week we were talking about how we hadn't really seen the impacts hadn't been as great as we may have originally expected, but we've seen the oil price continue to rise into the 90s. The last figure I saw when I checked it out was around $98 a barrel. It's still not, as high as it could get to, but I mean, there's still room for it to go, and it all depends. It could go up even further. It all depends on what happens there in the Middle East with the Iran conflict. And what we had was, as people started to realize this toward the end of last week and over the weekend, there was an absolute freak out on the markets on Monday. I don't know if you remember that, John, but basically the ASX fell 4%. Other Asian markets fell very sharply. And so we've got the markets, significantly down on maybe 4 to 5%. The ASX 200's down around 4% on where it was earlier in the month or last month. So, yeah, we've had market reaction to it. We had panic buying of fuel for a while. There's something interesting now in Australia where I guess maybe it's, it does mean we are paying attention to an extent, and we are concerned. We are concerned about shortages and things not working properly. So yeah, there was a lot of panic buying of fuel. I didn't see much of that today when I filled up. I was a bit concerned I may not be able to get any, but it seemed to be all fine. But yeah, we've had we're experiencing the disruptions here from what's going on in the Middle East. We've had those high petrol prices, and we've seen it impact our financial markets. But look, that plunge, it's down, but it's still not. It still could fall even further if the news worsens. So we'll wait and see, and you'll have some views on that, I'm sure. And this is all happening at a time when so we've got higher fuel prices, which are affecting household budgets, and for those people with mortgages, they face the prospect of another rate rise next week. The probability that the markets are assuming that when they're buying some financial assets in the money market, they're effectively making a bet on what the overnight cash rate is going to be next month. And what you see is that probability of a rate rise next week, so next Tuesday, is now around 2/3, whereas last week it was around 1/3. So they thought it was more likely than not they wouldn't raise. So if we go back to last week, the expectation was they'd wait until the May meeting when they've got the March quarter inflation data. But now there's an expectation they'll increase next week because we've been talking about inflation and concerns it's entrenched. And what's fascinating is this all happened because of a podcast conversation that Andrew Hauser did with Michelle Grattan the other day, where he made some comments which were interpreted hawkishly, where the way he expressed himself about how the RBA is concerned about this, the risk of inflation getting baked in, of inflation expectations lifting, and then inflation getting some momentum. The way that he said it made the markets realize, oh, hang on, these guys they're a lot more serious than we thought. And so now now the markets are thinking it's more likely than not that they will increase next week. So that's going to be more pain for households on top of the high petrol prices that we're paying now. But of course, things could actually get worse. Some commentators are expecting not just a rate rise this month, but then one in May, and so there could be more than one more this year, and so more pain for households. So, John, that's my
Gene,
roundup.
if I could cut in, sorry, I don't know if you're allowed to have the guests cut in during the roundup, but
cut in, Gideon.
We must be the only country, developed country in the world raising interest rates right now. One of the only.
Yeah, well, I think that's because we stuffed up with our monetary policy. Our RBA.
But so did a lot of countries. Why us?
Oh, well, no.
I don't disagree. I want to know how badly our politicians have screwed up.
No. Well, I think it's the RBA. I mean, like Jim Chalmers is certainly complicit in that they've been, they haven't got their budget under control, and so they're spending much more than they should be. But the RBA's known about that for, the last couple of years, right? But they didn't increase interest rates as much as they probably should have, and then they started cutting them and cut them too much when they probably should have just left them where they were or even had them higher. What they were trying to do was to lock in that low unemployment rate around 4%. So, like, the way they've talked about it, it's as if they were running a bit of an experiment. They were trying to see how, whether they could lock in that full employment. And that was consistent with what Jim Chalmers was telling them, right? He wanted them to, I think he originally wanted them to try and get full employment with monetary policy, make that as important a goal as inflation. But then they didn't go explicitly fully down that route, but it looks like they have tried to keep unemployment in the low fours. And the problem is that may be, from the point of view of fighting inflation, that might actually be too low, and they didn't set the interest rates at the right level. So I think there's a big concern about that now. But good question, Gideon. John, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think we just consistently, compared to most of our peers, we were acting slower and more calmly on monetary policy, and I think that's come back to bite us.
Is that it? I mean, but again, I make the point. I mean, the US was pretty complacent too. I'm old enough to remember.
But they acted better than us.
Inflation was transitory and all this other crap. They didn't acknowledge it at the time. And we're not the only country to spend a lot of money. So I'm just, again, why are our rates going up when in the developed world they're going down?
Well, I think the US and the UK and Canada and New Zealand all did start putting their rates up quicker than us. Then they put them up higher than us. So I think we would. Because we were slower to act, we're getting the sting in the end of this. But I've got to say one thing on this, the interest rate question. I'm torn here, Gene, because, I think our rates have been too low for too long, and they've tended to try too much, which is what I believe is beyond the correct remit of the RBA to aim for unemployment. All right, they can't control unemployment. They can just control inflation. Are they printing too much money? Not enough. That's the one thing they can control. So I think they've made a mistake by focusing on that. And kept rates too low. But I don't think the current shocks that are coming through actually would justify further action. Now, I may end up agreeing with an interest rate increase because maybe they should have been doing that already. But I don't think the new information, this oil shock that's going to come through, it's going to spike prices. That's certainly going to happen. It'll show up on the CPI data. But to my mind, it depends very much what's causing the CPI spike. Right?
Yes.
If I can give a little mini monetary lesson for those poor innocent people sitting at home. Right, inflation is caused by too much money chasing not enough goods. And normally that's created when the RBA is creating too much money. They put too much money out there chasing the same amount of goods, and that creates inflation. The correct response is to stop putting too much money out. And the conventional mechanism is by increasing interest rates. All good, fine. I agree with all that. There is another way to get inflation, and that is you could have too much money chasing not enough goods. You could get there by a sudden drop in the amount of goods there are. That's a supply side shock. Now that supply side shock will still show up as inflation, but firstly, it's a one-step inflation, right? It's a one-off type of a transitory, what they called transitory last time when they were lying to us. But if it's a supply shock, that part is somewhat transitory. And unless I don't think there's any particular need to make sure we get that sort of inflation under control because it's self-correcting anyway. Now, as I said, I still probably think they had monetary policy too loose to start with. But where I'm conflicted here is all of the data that's coming in and convincing other people to raise interest rates, I don't think is a legitimate reason to be raising interest rates because it looks like it's a supply shock coming in from the Middle East.
But John,
unless you think it's coming from elsewhere.
John, didn't we were talking about this before Iran, weren't we? We were talking about inflation being higher than the target band, the risk of it breaking out. So it's not just what's happening with Iran, why they'll lift rates next week.
Well, if you look at the chart you put up before, it seems to be the recent commentary is what is getting people to change their mind. And the recent commentary relates to the impending inflation, mostly caused by the coming oil shock, or the existing oil shock. It's not coming anymore. It's already here. So look, if it ends up that by a strange coincidence, I end up agreeing with all of the other boffins, then great, so be it. But I was already thinking inflation was too high, caused by too much loose money, and we needed to wind that back. I've seen no additional data in the last week or two that would justify me sharpening that critique. I just still hold the old position. And it so happens that this new data gets the RBA boffins to catch up to me.
We'll have to get House's speech up, and we'll probably have to do that in the next episode. But basically, I thought what happened was because he was interpreted as more hawkish, not just because of Iran, but because it looks like they're more concerned about the underlying inflation pressures, the core inflation. It's not just an Iran story. It's the markets suddenly realizing that the RBA is more concerned about underlying inflation than they thought that they were previously. They thought the RBA was a bit more relaxed about it. And then Hauser comes out and he says, he's more hawkish about, he's more of an inflation hawk. So he's someone who really wants to push, crack down on inflation. And I think that's what's changed the situation. But yeah, we'll need to get the statement up exactly and go through it word for word, which I'm not prepared for at the moment. But I think, yeah.
I didn't see the statement, so I'll take your word for it. I mean, you've never led me astray before, G, so I'm sure you wouldn't start now.
Okay.
What's the politics of that, by the way? I do want to come back around to the oil price, but if we are going to be experiencing oil shortages, higher petrol prices, running short of diesel and fertilizer, perhaps at the same time that interest rates are going up, is Teflon Jim finally going to be stung with something here? I mean, Gideon, you have much greater insight into political machinations than us two old men.
Well, look, I don't know is the answer, because you don't know which way the messaging is going to land. Obviously, Chalmers is going to say, what's the thing they always say when the economy is going down the toilet and they want to wash their hands of it? Strong headwinds, they'll say. Well, we're facing strong headwinds from a volatile global environment. And of course, the coalition, hopefully, and I'm sure they will rightly say, well, no, it's also because you guys are spending too much money. You're paying the mortgage off with the credit card and have been for some time. I don't know where that lands politically. I don't know who cops it. One thing I will say, though, is with interest rates, I'm speaking as the non-economist in this room. I get that, to offset the inflation, the impulse is to put less money out into the economy and bring down the price of goods. I get the crude mechanism of it all. But as you said, John, if the cause is just an oil shock from the Middle East that just skews the stats by pushing up oil and admittedly everything else that relies on energy and so on, if that's the cause, I don't see how making people pay extra for their mortgage will help the economy in an overall sort of macro sense. It'll just add, one sort of economic pain to the other.
Yeah, well, that's what that was kind of the point I was making as well. The caveat I put on that is I think we probably already were pumping too much money into the economy before the Iran war kicked off. And so I was already predisposed.
We've been spending too much since I was in short pants, since I was in university. Well,
this isn't just spending too much. I mean, this isn't a government critique. I mean, Gene and I spend a lot of time critiquing the government. We don't think Jim's doing everything perfectly by any stretch of the imagination. But I think, and feel free to disagree with this, and Gene, tell me if I'm verbaling you here, we've kind of settled on a position that this is more the RBA's fault than the government's. Now, the government is adding pressure to it, but the RBA is supposed to be able to factor that in. That's kind of their job. It is their job to make sure that the amount of money flowing into the economy doesn't exceed the amount of goods flowing into the economy. And that I feel anyway, Gene can tell me if he disagrees, the RBA has dropped the ball. They're primarily to blame for this. They're the one that's put too much money sloshing around the economy.
But there's lots of blame to go around. Let's just say that in terms of the inflation outcome, I think the RBA is to blame for that. But the government would be to blame for having interest rates higher than otherwise. I mean, because they're the ones who who are spending all the money, who are creating the circumstances for the inflation that means the RBA has to lift the rates. But I think the fact that the RBA is now having to reverse and go back to start lifting rates again, that's because they should have had. That's their problem. That's a policy stuff up on their part. They should have had them higher to begin with, and they shouldn't have been cutting them as they started to do last year. So, look, I think there's blame for both the Reserve Bank and the federal government.
Yeah, we're equal opportunity assholes here. We can blame everyone.
I don't think we're assholes.
Well, no, you're not, Gene. You're the nice guy.
You're the nice guy.
It.
We're calling it how we see it. Frank and fearless commentary, John.
Frank and fearless. I love that. That's good. So
both things can be right at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I can be the asshole and Gene's the nice guy. That's what's kind of the good cop, bad cop routine. Now, the oil prices, Gene, last week we had a bit of a chat about this. We talked about the Iran war writ large. And I was quite relaxed about the threat of the oil shock, suggesting that firstly, there's pipelines that go through Saudi Arabia, which you can funnel some of that oil through that way. And secondly, you can ramp up production elsewhere because there's plenty of places in the world where it's profitable to drill for more oil if prices go up above, even 80 or 90, but certainly if it goes above 110, 120. And that's what got me thinking that I was doubting this sort of $200 a barrel scenario that had people spooked. Now, I still don't think we're going to get to $200 a barrel. But I got to say, I am getting a little bit more worried about the oil situation. And I've got to say, a lot of this comes down to how quickly the war ends. Which the refresher from last week, my opinion is that there's not going to be regime change, but at some stage, Trump is just going to declare victory anyway, and the war will wind down for that reason, having then achieved nothing because the same regime will be there still able to do what they were doing before. So, but you'd expect that from me, being an anti-war Nick, as I am. We can get into that if you like. But the point is, if the war does peter down, we'll be able to get the oil flowing again. And this is all just a theoretical exercise. But if it doesn't, if it holds off for a couple more weeks, there are a few stings coming through in the future. It's our capacity to refine oil in Australia is significantly diminished. Our usual source of refined petrol and diesel in Asia gets a lot of their crude from the Middle East. And they start cutting back output. I had previously thought, all right, so there's a bidding war, but there are lags involved in that. Even if we're willing to just pay more, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be able to get all of the stock we want, which could potentially lead to a bit of petrol and diesel shortage. And a petrol shortage, we can't drive around as much. That, it's inconvenient. It's not good. It'll create a political furor. But a diesel shortage, that's how trucks move. That's how farmers, tractors operate.
Yes.
That's how diesel generators work. I mean, a shortage of diesel, and also the refineries we do have in Australia. If we were reliant only on Australia, the oil we have is light oil, which is good for turning into petrol. It's not good for turning into diesel. So our self-sufficiency is only at 20%, and that 20% is mostly petrol, not diesel. If we can't get, if the ships stop showing up, and they haven't yet, right? The ships are still showing up at the moment. But if this drags on for a few more weeks, those ships are going to get harder to get them to come to Australia. And then we can try to pay extra and convince the Americans to send us some ships, but they take 40 days to get here. And if our shortage is already on for 40 days, we're going to notice it, especially since our reserves go for 30 days. And so this has got me a little bit more vexed in looking at this issue. Gene, you said last week you were a little bit more relaxed after chatting to me. I don't know. Are you still feeling relaxed?
I'm not necessarily feeling relaxed. I mean, I am hopeful that this does get resolved, that Trump finds some way to claim a victory and then, pull back. I mean, or they reach some sort of deal with Iran. I don't know. I mean, it'd be, he seems to be able to pull, remarkable things off. I mean, I don't know how sometimes, but he seems to have that ability. So I'm still hopeful that they find a way through this. And I mean, things could get a lot worse. And I think that's what you're saying, John, that, there is if it does continue on, but I think at the moment, the markets are they're not really pricing in that that apocalyptic scenario that you're talking about.
No, Gideon, and Gordian.
Gordian's fine.
What's your thought on the future of petrol and diesel in Australia?
Look, it's a war in the Middle East. Obviously, oil is going to get affected. Obviously, there'll be even a psychological impact is something. Look, again, I'm not an economist. What I will say is that the commentary suggests that Trump set this up very well insofar as he took care of the Venezuela problem in advance of going into Iran. So that, as you said, has brought that new source online. Don't forget the existence of shale and so on. But yeah, in Australia, we're pretty stuffed because, let the record show if the worst happens, and I'm not saying it will, I'm not saying it's likely to, but and China, has problems of their own, not least their own oil supplies. But if, say, they made a play for Taiwan and this became a global war, well, guess what? We could be blockaded as an ally of the US, and then we'd really be up. We'd really be in a. So that's one thing to consider. Look, in relation to the broader war, though, I'm in the minority here. I would. I'm happy about the prospects of regime change. I don't think you can do a deal with that particular regime. Yes, obviously I've got a personal reason to not like Iran because of the problems they've caused Israel and so on over the last little while, but I'm also probably more so driven by seeing a free Iran. I mean, look at the Iranian diaspora around the world, not least of all in Australia. You'd have to be a pretty hard-hearted person to say no to that joy that the monster Khomeini is gone, and hopefully the regime with it. I don't. It's not like Venezuela where Trump could plop in somebody else he happens to like more, who's a rational actor. These are lunatics. So I don't know. But anyway, I don't know if you want to get into the geopolitics of it or stick to the economics.
Well, I love the geopolitics of it. Our long-suffering listeners had to sit through it for 20, 30 minutes last week. Two things on that. One is, hard-hearted bastards. Yes, guilty. I mean, I think Australian policy should be in the interest of Australia. American policy should be in the interest of America. People in Tanzania could have a wonderful, massive party about really enjoying some policy in Tanzania. I don't think Australia or America or the UK or anyone should lift a single finger to help those poor, long-suffering Tanzanians. And I'm sorry to my Iranian friends, but I don't believe in that sort of foreign aid and charity. But onto the point of the desirability of regime change, well, put that aside, because I think there's questions about, what we realistically expect to come next. You think there could be... Sorry.
Well, the problem is that didn't work out well originally, did it? I mean, the reason we ended up with the theocracy was because the Shah was such an authoritarian. The secret police.
The sequel's better than the original in this case. But look, and this is the.
It may well be, but my question was going to be slightly different. What's the chance of that? Because I can't see. We discussed this in depth last week. I couldn't see any path that went from here to there. I could see a path that went to full state collapse, full civil war, Trump just declaring a victory and going home, the war dragging on for a year. I can see all of those paths. I can't see a realistic path that gets from here to there, even if there is desirable. Let's take that as given.
Well, yeah, I mean, you said it could be, collapse and civil war. I mean, those are two mechanisms right there. The problem is there's no real armed resistance group that's ready to, swoop in and, there was talk about Trump arming the Kurds. That might work in certain sections of the country, I suppose. But look, Trump he seems to be going back and forth between this is a regime change war and this is to disable their capabilities and so on. I suspect that's Trump deliberately keeping things vague because that sort of seems to be his modus operandi in a lot of situations. He likes to keep people guessing. He probably knows in his heart of hearts that, you want to bomb the country and end up doing another Obama-style nuclear deal with these people. It's not going to work. So there's that. And look, what puzzles me is that Trump doesn't seem to see the Shah as a viable alternative. And
I think he's right.
It's in terms of a regime. You're not going to have a repeat of the Iran and Afghanistan disasters where they expected to have this beautiful Jeffersonian democracy spring up in the heart of the Middle East. It doesn't quite work that way. The king, having a king figurehead is probably the best way to go. And there's a lot of esteem for the Shah, and he's the only person who seems to be able to hold the country together. Can he? I don't know. But, Iranians are not like the Iraqis or the Afghans were. They're a proud people and quite a sophisticated people as well. My instinct is they could make it work. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
It's very interesting, justifying a war by quoting John Lennon. I think that is innovative. I'll give you that. Look, at my point, firstly, the Shah has said he would angle towards democracy anyway, and maybe he would. Like, even if we believed all the best things about the Shah, and even if we were as naive as Gene and believed all the good things about democracy, which is my regular dig against democracy, even if you believed all of that, I still just can't see it from here to there. I mean, you talked about the Kurds before. The Shah's been clear that if the Kurds keep trying to have independence, when he comes back, he'll just continue the war against the Kurds. So you could have the Kurds versus the Shah, both funded by Trump, which could be an interesting
poor old Kurds. War. They always get a rough deal, don't they? Yeah.
Maybe they should try stopping socialists, and it'd be a bit easier to back them. But yeah, I don't see a path from here to there, because that state collapse idea, I don't think leads to an outcome that you would actually wish on Iranians if you cared about them. And my primary motivation is not my deep love for Iranians, not that I've got anything against them either, but if that is the motivation, state collapse, I don't think you look at Libya and say, that's what I want to give people when I care about them.
But no,
so there doesn't seem a path that gets from... No, but that's what state collapse would look like. So it doesn't have to be the same as Libya, but that's what state collapse would look like. And my point is, I could see how you get to state collapse. I could see how you get to a year or 2 year long war. I could see how you get to the most likely outcome, in my opinion, which is Trump just declaring victory. I can't see how you actually get rid of a nuclear, uranium enrichment facilities and ballistic missile programs without regime change. And I can't see how you get regime change. So that just means
the generals defect, the army defects. You arm them. There are ways and means. It's not impossible. The US has installed regimes it likes for decades. Why can't it? One last hurrah. I get the whole. I've gotten wise to the whole neocon thing as well, like everybody else who lived through the 2000s. I really have. And I'm my pessimist. I feel like I'm coming out of retirement just for this one reunion tour, this one farewell tour for the neocon dream. One more regime change, and then we're done.
I've got to say that there is a cohort of people who see with 2020 hindsight every war they got wrong in the past, but see with perfect clarity how the next war. The next war is always great. The next war is great. This one is. War's great. Yeah.
This one is. This is a good war. This is World War II.
People keep saying it's World War III. I don't think it's going to be World War III either. I just see it as being either a war for nothing, because Trump declares victory when nothing's changed, most likely outcome, or the worst case scenario, it drags on. Because I think you could have defections from the military if the war dragged on for more than 2 years. I give that a 20, 30, maybe 40% probability. At the moment, I think there's a rally to the flag. The IRGC is not going to give up power anytime soon. They've just now kind of re-solidified power with more hardliners. Now, you could wear that down over months and years. But that means a war that goes for months and years. Which one?
They'll kill all the new leaders, so problem solved. They'll just ship a box of beepers.
Yeah, if they could have done that, I think they'd be doing it already.
They are doing it already. They've knocked them
only killed one Ayatollah so far. Only one. It's been 2 weeks.
There was only
one.
Well, I haven't reported a new one yet. Yeah, anyway.
I guess we can come back and test this theory in a couple of months' time. I mean, this makes me more worried about the oil thing, I've got to say, because if it's regime change we're after, we're not getting it in a couple of weeks, which means that petrol issue that we were talking about before. Now, I don't think Gideon's right. I think Trump will be spooked by oil prices, declare a fake victory, and the
midterms are coming up. You might be right. Yeah, he might just try to take the win and move on. I hope he doesn't, but yeah, I can't rule that out. But Israel wouldn't. Israel wouldn't.
Well, that'd be interesting, because then they might continue the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. If Israel keeps dropping bombs, then maybe Iran would
very possibly. But look, you have to understand Bibi as well. Like, he has been obsessed for Iran for his entire political career. Now, there's an election coming up, I believe, later this year in Israel. It's due to be. Bibi will almost certainly lose, not through any fault of his, in my view. But Winston Churchill lost after World War II, despite what he did. So Bibi really has one shot left in the locker here, and if he leaves office without decapitating Iran, that will be a failure for him. So he will not. Israel can do all sorts of things to affect regime change. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I like that. That's probably the recipe for ongoing low-level simmering war for quite a long time. I don't know where that goes next, but I can't see Iran regime changing Israel, and I can't see Israel on their own regime changing Iran. But you're a confident man, Gideon. Confidence is good to have in life. Not always when you're playing with the lives of millions of other people, but at least as a general virtue, it's a good thing to have. By the way, one other thing on the so this is segueing back still on the Iran war, but back on an economic consequence of it. Have either of you guys looked into the impact of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz on urea? So urea is used in firstly the stuff they put into trucks to make the truck engines work properly, and that's basically already getting closed off for us. And then it's also used in fertilizer, and if not available for us in the coming month, we're facing a situation where crops are likely to be down 20, 30, 40%, or we're going to have to put in different crops, which is going to have lower yields because they're different crops. So there's potentially a significant agricultural and food element coming out of this. Have you, Gideon, you haven't looked into it. Gene, have you seen anything about this?
I've probably seen some of the commentary and analysis you have, John, but yeah, please continue.
Oh no, that's well, I was just looking into it and getting worried about what comes next, because it's not obvious to me that we've got an easy workaround there. We do have a urea factory coming online in Australia in a year or two's time. That's cold comfort, given that we're not in a year or two's time right now.
Just live off canned food until then. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's certainly one option. I don't know if that's. I mean, I guess one issue here would be if we do have this fallout. Maybe we'll go back to you on this one, Gideon. If we do have this fallout, if we do run out of diesel, and I don't think we'd entirely run out, but we'd start having shortages and rationing, and it would have to go first to the trucks and tractors. And if we do start running low on urea, so then you have less fertilizer, the trucks work less well, and there's just less food on the table. Prices could have potentially double or triple for the sort of bread and meat, the stuff we get from Australia. What would be the political consequence of that one? Who would get blamed?
Oh, the government would get blamed. I mean, if they're having to ration petrol, or if there are shortages that lead to people dying because ambulances won't run, the federal government will get the blame, because particularly given Barnaby Joyce and I guess Matt Canavan to an extent has been vocal on this. They've been critical of our self-sufficiency, of our ability to the fact that our refineries have closed down. So, I think they're very politically vulnerable on this issue. But look, to an extent, John, I mean, I know it's good to run these scenarios, but aren't we sort of involved in this exercise? Didn't Mark Twain said, I've been through some terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened. I mean, we're actually, there's a bit of catastrophizing here.
We'll be fine. No problems here.
Well, as you remember, that was
to be complacent, but sometimes we could sort of get carried away with some of these doomsday.
No, I understand the instinct. As you remember, last week that was my position, right? Last week I was saying these people, these penny littles, the sky's falling, and I was trying to laugh it all off. The more I've looked into it, the more I'm starting to think people are underestimating what is very likely to come about now, unless we can shut down the war in the next couple of days, which I don't think will happen, especially not if Gideon's in charge. I think people maybe need to
bomb Iran.
We may need to start preparing ourselves for what comes next. Which, look, it's perfectly survivable. I previously thought it was going to be like a couple of points of inflation and a mild recession. It may be that we're looking at more like 5 to 10 to 15% inflation and a bigger recession. But it's not the end of the world, right? We've got through that before. I mean, most people lived through the Great Depression. I'm not saying it'll be a Great Depression, but we can live through it, that's for sure. But it may be something people need to put on their radar as something that maybe do stock up on canned goods.
Yeah, go to Costco. Yeah, look. Yeah.
I suspect the political fallout is going to be a growing number of people getting quite angry at the war, and they may gravitate towards anti-war parties. I think One Nation will do well, even though they're pro-war in this instance. But I think they'll do well as just being the screw the establishment, a pox on everyone's house. A new person would just do.
Sorry, mate. I do see a scenario in which the government doesn't take much of a hit on it, and that is if they manage to I guess war is a bit of a distant war. If it was a global conflict, as I said, if the scenario, I don't think it'll happen anyway, but the Chinese are involved and we're involved. But if the government does bring in some sort of rationing system and does put us on a war footing and convene a national cabinet and so on, people might wear it and even rally around the government. And I say that because remember what happened 6 years ago when we were put under all manner of restrictions for the sake of a bloody, case of the sniffles or the coronavirus, and people loved it. So there is a conceivable way in which the government can wrap itself around in this, emergency, everybody has to do their part and so on. I don't think that's likely either, but I can see it happening.
No, I could see that as long as they had someone else to blame, but I think they would then pivot to blaming America and Israel. Who would they blame?
Albanese? No, I don't know.
Yeah.
War,
so
headwinds.
They need to find someone else.
I think this is politically devastating for the government if this goes badly, because people like Barnaby Joyce and Matt Canavan to an extent will be able, and possibly Angus Taylor. I think Canavan's probably going to be the best advocate on this issue for them. He'll be able to say, look, we've been talking about self-sufficiency for years. I think it'll be an appealing argument. I think the government's very vulnerable on this issue.
Yes, it probably will play well to the Barnaby and Matt's. Well, at that point, do we want to? That could be a good point to pivot then. Matt Canavan, you say. Interesting. I heard he just became leader of the National Party. Gideon, is he going to turn the ship around? Are the Nats going to now overtake One Nation, put them in the rearview mirror and take over the country?
If Matt Canavan can't do it, then nobody can. Stick a fork in them, they're done. I mean, it's amazing. Matt Canavan, I can't think of an issue really a major issue he's come out with in the last, his entire career that I've disagreed with. So that's a start. He's fought valiantly. He may very well be. He's fought valiantly, though, on the climate issue and on the renewable energy issue and so on. He's got his head screwed on correctly there. All these years, as the coalition has broken my heart and yours, and again and again and again, I've always said, if only somebody like Matthew Canavan was leader. Well, now he is. So we'll see how that works out. The problem is that you could dig up the corpse of Robert Menzies and Earl Page and put them in charge of the coalition. I think a lot of people have stopped listening. I think a lot of people have, the coalition has been systematically, mostly the Liberal Party, but the National Party in some respects, they've been kicking their base in the shins for the better part of 10 years plus, ever since 2015. Look at what happened with the terrible demise of Tony Abbott and the bringing forth of that Malcolm Turnbull. Look at what Scott Morrison put us through during, again, Corona, but also that net zero stuff that he came out with towards the end of his term. People, I think the most, and we'll get on to One Nation in a minute, I'd imagine, but I can't help but be a little bit satisfied to see the coalition get the comeuppance, but maybe, just maybe, Matt Canavan is the circuit breaker they need.
Can I give you one theory on that? Because I think you're right. The coalition has long had the theory that you can take your base for granted, treat them like shit. What are they going to do?
Well,
sure, they might
preference
One Nation, but then they have to preference you. So I think this is a symptom of our system of compulsory preferential voting, which basically encourages major parties to take their bases for granted, mistreat them. And the only way that to shake up that system is for enough of the base to go to a minor party, for that party to become a real political threat. And then suddenly they remember, oh, wait a second, I was supposed to appeal to the people that I was representing all this time. So it is I would argue, another case for voluntary voting, or at the very least, voluntary preferential voting, so that you're not forced to vote for one of the majors. And I think that would be an outlet that would decrease the chance of major parties, both centre right and centre left, taking their base for granted so much. You agree with that? Gene, where are you on voluntary voting?
That's a difficult one, John, because I'm a great lover of democracy, and I think having the compulsory
including
voting,
democracy by force.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a tradition, and we have the democracy sausage. So, look, that's a difficult one. I actually don't mind having the compulsory voting. I mean, as much as it upsets me as a classical liberal, philosophically rather than politically necessarily, I think it is. I actually don't have a problem with it, and I think there are some benefits to it.
What are the benefits? The democracy sausage notwithstanding.
Well, I mean, the benefits are, well, we get the views of the whole population. I mean, I think, isn't there a risk that with the alternative, I mean, look, let's discuss the pros and cons of this. With the alternative, isn't there the risk that they will go to the extremes to try and get their vote out? Well, isn't it better to try and go for the median voter to understand, where middle Australia, so to speak, is on particular issues?
because then you get these insultingly stupid campaigns that we have at the moment, where it's the case of the guy who's giving you the free computer versus the guy who's giving you the free hospital bed. It's aimed at those, and also it's actually created the situation in which election campaigns are about nothing, because now both parties by design are avoiding saying anything controversial that might just scare off those compulsory voters and get them to, go over to the other side. So you have these stupid campaigns where nothing happens and they just have photo ops with Medicare cards and petrol bars and so on. But look, I think the problem, I agree with you, John. I think the problem actually goes deeper than just preferential voting, though. I think their whole electoral system, single member electorates, has had its day. This is quite a controversial view, but this idea of sectioning off the country into 151 different areas, firstly, that just entrenches the duopoly, because it encourages the Labor or the coalition to win another one. I would favour a unicameral proportional representation house like Israel or Germany has, where any lunatic who gets above 4% of the vote can sit in the parliament. You get a plurality of views, and you get coalitions. They break down. You go to new elections. Yes, it's less stable, but you get much more vibrant debate. You get many more opportunities to boot your government out, which I think is something that you should have more of, not less, rather than going to 4-year terms or something like that. But also, again, you have this is the explains the fragmentation with the coalition and to a lesser extent Labor, or they went through the same thing 10 years ago. You have these Coles and Woolworths style duopoly of parties that are trying to appeal to everybody. Well, politics is a lot more fragmented now. People want choice. People want, politics is about niche in a lot of respects. I think it would be much better to get a representative sample of where those different points of view sit in the political system and account for them as a whole, rather than just squeezing the views of a large and increasingly fragmented country into these two political party organs that are not fit for purpose anymore.
Right, very eloquently. So can I say a few things on this? One is, Gene, implicit in your argument was you were saying the virtue of compulsory voting is it allows major parties to disregard their base. We were just talking about, I think, One Nation, to some degree, the Greens, these sort of big changes came about because they disregarded their base. And the virtue of compulsory voting is, you get to disregard your base because the swing voter is the only one that matters. Everyone focuses on the swing voter. Now, there could be, firstly, I'm not sure that's a more democratic system to minimize the number of people you have to pay attention to. But I'll put that aside, because I don't actually, I have no great love for the concept of democracy to start with. Gideon, you thought you were radical. I just throw the whole thing out. But but if we're just going to judge it on a utilitarian, does it work basis, can I suggest your argument would have some weight, Gene, if the swing voter was the median voter. So if you really did just have a left to right line, and the ones in the middle are just, well-informed, serious people who are good at taking a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I compromise here and I compromise there, then the compulsory voting would end up with centrist solutions. What I think you'll find is the swing voter isn't just philosophically centrist, they're just low information. Right, yes. That is the swing voter that everyone's after. So what you have is a political system aimed at giving low information voters whatever tickles their vibes on that day, which is a kind of a race to the bottom in terms of policy depth.
Yeah, and by the way, can we stop calling them swing voters as well? Swing voters are just people who aren't wedded to any particular party and vote, differently each time. So under a voluntary system, swing voters could vote at every election if they wanted to. They're just not forced to. So again, I agree with you, John. There's low information, low propensity, low interest voters. And you know what? I actually think there's something beautiful about a country in which people are apathetic about politics. If the government makes so little difference to their life, they can't even be bothered rocking up at a primary school or a church hall to vote every 3 years. I think that's a sign that the country's on the right track.
Well, that's a decision as well. I would argue that is a decision. The choice not to vote is a choice. And then people say, well, you have the choice to show up and not vote. Well, why add that extra inconvenience, right? There's I don't see any argument that forcing people to show up and not vote somehow improves the quality of our democracy. Anyway, we've beaten up Gene on that issue enough. I think we didn't know we were going to do that topic. But yeah, so you did mention we might get back to the One Nation side of things. So I think you're right that if Matt can't do it, no one can. I think the Liberals maybe should have rolled the dice on Hastie if they really wanted to give one last hurrah to getting people's attention again. I think I probably agree with Angus more often than I agree with Hastie. But I think just on a Machiavellian sense, Hastie probably had a better chance to get people to sort of snap out of it and pay attention again. But Matt Canavan has that, like the potential to snap people out of it. Doesn't mean he necessarily will, because maybe, like you say, it's too late. So what do you make? Is One Nation unstoppable now, in the esteemed opinion of Comrade Rozner?
No, not at all. And look, I like Pauline. I've always liked Pauline. Again, I'm personally very interested in this phenomenon because I think it has, if nothing else, woken up the centre right of politics. It may very well be existential for the Liberal Party and so on. But look, it's very early. The next federal election is still 2.5 years away, or 2 years away. That's a long time in politics. And, I'm old enough to remember a lot of One Nation incarnations. They have a habit of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They have a habit of descending into really weird infighting a lot. Now, again, I wish them all the best. I really, really do. Maybe it's different this time around as well. So not far from unstoppable. But what I will say is that I'll be watching the South Australian election very, very closely. I'll be watching the Victorian election very closely. But look, I don't think One Nation is in inevitability. I think the bigger is, there's no such thing as a bigger inevitability. It's a binary thing. But the stronger trend I'm seeing is that, and the more permanent one, is just the demise of the coalition and the Liberal Party. That's the problem. It's a structural thing. There just aren't enough Liberal Party voters out there anymore.
Well, is that because I've wondered about this? Because as you say, One Nation has had a few breakthroughs in the past, and it often ends in tears. But it seems to me, and previously One Nation goes up, and then when their vote goes down, people go back to the coalition. There's a chance here that there's been a structural break where One Nation could break through, sort of sever the ties between the voters and the coalition. And if One Nation does implode, they don't go back to the coalition. And then I don't know what happens next. That's really a moment where someone really interesting, Comrade Dictator Gideon or someone new could show up and
revolutionize. Clive comes back.
Oh,
Clive.
Wow. Yeah, that is certainly one option. Or
talk about the two of the one flush. I mean, really and truly, he's back. Anyway.
Yes, apparently he's running again. So,
the world holds its breath.
Gideon, if you were Angus Taylor or whoever was taking over the coalition here, we talk about it may be too late, and that's a great imponderable. If people just aren't listening, it doesn't matter if it's Jesus, Gandhi, and Buddha doing it together. If they're not listening, it's over. But let's assume for the moment that it is salvageable. What would you do? How would you, sort of knock over the table and restart with something that would do two things: grab people's attention. It has to be politically, within the capacity to get done or at least get people talking about, and would actually work. Not just something stupid so that everyone votes for you and then you destroy the country, but something that would work and could get you elected. What would the Gideon agenda be?
The real look, the barbecue stopper is probably migration, right? But the kind of announcements or proposals we've seen in the past won't quite cut it. I'll lower the number to, X thousand a year versus Y thousand for the next, 2.5 years. No. There needs to be and that, by the way, that's not an assessment of the merits of the issue one way or the other. But politically speaking, it's just absolutely toxic. And the best way to grab attention and just to get that momentum would be to put some cuts on the table and then put it back on Labor and try to say, well, will you support our cuts, yes or no? Ask that in question time from now until the end of time. Do you support our cuts to migration? And try to reframe the debate a little bit. But, even then it's tough. It's tough because Pauline has the brand equity on that issue. And it's very difficult to. It's like when the Liberal Party ran a few state elections ago here in Victoria on health. we could go back to leaching in the state of Victoria, and Labor would still win the debate on health, as the comedian Dennis Miller said, or to paraphrase him. So, is that market already cornered? Look, the fundamental thing about Angus, though, is that he said all the right things. He came to office and said, we are going to bring migration numbers down and lift standards. We are going to, do something about inflation and so on. We are. My focus is making sure people get a home. Another, hot ticket issue out there. The problem is that none of it's made a dent. The polling is still in the toilet. Now, you can't judge one poll. You have to look at a trend, but it ain't looking good. So I don't know where you go from here, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I got to say the problem with doing something mild on immigration is I think it's, and I was going to ask you what you would actually do. Because firstly, lack of policy detail. One Nation's come out with policy detail. They say explicitly, we will allow 120,000 new feet to land on the soil. We expect 120,000 to leave as well. So we'll have net zero immigration instead of carbon. I mean, they've got some detail. It's quite bold and forceful and in your face.
Wow.
And if the Liberals come out and say, I'll do a half of that, watered down a little bit, maybe after I get approval of the BCA, I'm not sure it's going to break through. And by raising the issue of immigration further, you probably tell everyone, please think about the One Nation issue as much as you can before the election, much like you make the point on health policy with Labor. It's a tough one. I don't know if the Liberals are going to be able to out immigration One Nation.
No.
I also don't know if they have
That's
it within them.
Point.
I don't think they've got the political courage to do something, or if you disagree with it, the political stupidity to do something as bold as outflanking One Nation on immigration.
No, and you wouldn't want to outflank them. Yeah, I take your point.
So I think it would have to be somehow encouraging people to care about an economic agenda and then establishing yourself as the smartest person to be able to do something to simultaneously balance the budget, allow you to buy a house, put down the price of living and boost productivity so wages go up somehow. Convince people that matters more than they currently think it does, and convince people you've got a realistic plan to achieve it. Of course, achieving that is no easy thing within the parameters of modern politics, where you're not allowed to cut most of the spending.
No, correct.
I was hoping you had the magic, the silver bullet for us here. No silver bullet.
I think you're right. And actually, talking about brand equity, people really generally vote Liberal for two reasons in this country. One, the economy. Second, personal safety, whether that, on a state level police or on a federal level, defence and things like that. Both of those are big issues. You think you could make hay with them. Maybe things economically are still not quite as bad as they're going to get. That might help the Liberal Party as well. But look, even on those issues, they're not really making a dent.
Well, they haven't said anything yet, so how can you make a dent? So they have to have something of substance to say. Probably the thing that would help them break through the most is if China invaded Taiwan, or ideally if someone invaded Australia. That would be.
I don't know about that. People rally around their leaders. I reckon.
They also rally around the Conservative. It goes two ways.
Albanese could senior Spielbergo his way into becoming the John Curtin of the 21st century or something. You never know. If somebody as patently unlikable as Dan Andrews could have the meeting out of the palm of their hand in a great emergency, Albanese could. Anyway. I don't think it'll come to that. China has problems of their own, big problems, especially now, that our Lord and Saviour Donald J. Trump is taking that Iranian all out of their hands with his masterful, use of geopolitics.
I'll let that through to the key. Well, two things. Well, I'll come back to this comment. It did remind me of something I wanted to say earlier. I wanted to get your guys' opinion on what the Chinese have done for fuel security over there. They've got quite a big investment in coal to liquid. So they can make petrol and diesel out of coal, and they've got it's a technical term, a metric shit ton of coal. So with enough coal to liquid facilities, they can actually sidestep a lot of this. They've also got much more than anyone else in terms of stockpiles of petrol. So they've got that going for them, and they've got the land pipes through to Russia and Kazakhstan. So I suspect China's actually relatively less exposed to the coming oil shocks than most countries. But the issue of coal to liquid sort of got me curious when I was looking at how exposed Australia was with lack of access to thick crude. We just don't have much here, and then very little refining capacity. So we don't have much.
Would we actually drill for it?
Well, we drill for light crude.
We wouldn't touch our oil if we had it. We'd be too stupid. They were supposed to be drilling for all the Great Australian Bight, and then a couple of hundred people went out in paddleboards to protest it. Next minute, no more drilling.
Yeah, well, you may be right. We do drill for light crude. We drill for light crude and then send most of it to Asia, and then we import other crude from Asia and take that to our facilities down in Melbourne and process it there.
Sounds about
right. But the point is, just think, and maybe it's not worth doing, but just thinking about how you would be sustainable. Just, God forbid, a future war scenario. Coal to liquid. That's the solution the Chinese have stumbled on. We have a lot of coal in this country. I don't know, people are scared to use it.
What's the cost of running something like that, John, out of curiosity?
It only makes sense when the oil price is at $80. Right now it's well above that, but sometimes it goes to 65 to 75, in which case, but it would be a security mechanism, not an insurance against high price, but a security mechanism against being cut off.
It's nice to have, I suppose. Sorry, one more follow-up question. So when you say we only drill for light oil, do we don't have crude reserves, not even in the Bight and so on? Like there are just none on the continent. Okay, well, I'd be very surprised if
we don't have. I think we don't have thick crude in a place where you can economically get to it. We've got light crude, which we do drill for. I don't know if there's a bunch more light crude available that we're just not drilling for. That is beyond my ken. That's
almost certainly
my area. So I imagine we're screwing that up somehow, though, with all the regulations. Did you hear, by the way, that one of the solutions they've got on petrol is the government has dropped their standards and is allowing, 100,000 litres or 100 barrels of what they call sort of low quality petrol to re-enter the Australian market. Normally we make it and we sell it to Asia because their standards are different to ours, and we refuse to allow it into Australia, but they've dropped the standards
well, it's probably a stupid standard to begin with. It's probably more bullshit. Good. Drop the standards.
They accidentally do the right thing.
I drive a Ferrari, so what the hell do I care?
Gideon, your take on this? The Libs screwed themselves in voting for hate speech. Did you?
Yeah.
I assume you followed that back and forth, especially with Hastie saying he'd block it and then not blocking it, which I think probably damaged his capital amongst the online right. You think this is going to stick around, or you think this will fade as an issue? And do you think the Liberals were wrong? Let's actually start with
it all depends, because if it ends up like the UK and people are getting chucked in jail for memes, then of course people will hold it against the people who do it. My biggest concern is that the law is called the Fighting Anti-Semitism Bill. So every time some poor grandma again gets roughed up by the police for a couple of off-colour memes, she'll be charged under the Fighting Anti-Semitism Act. Well, guess who's going to cop it and who people are going to have it in for when that happens? Thanks a lot, Albanese. So, but beyond that, look, it's another reason people have stopped listening to the coalition and are flocking into One Nation, because the Liberal Party will say all sorts of nice things, but then don't forget that the internet censorship regime we have in this country emanated from Paul Fletcher, who was the Liberal communications minister under that brilliant Morrison government. So it'll be more baggage. I'm not sure if it's a barbecue stopper issue for those low information, swinging voters out there. But again, among the base, it's absolutely toxic.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think it's it's something that impacts the swing voters so much as the base that is being lost by the coalition to One Nation. And it's the sort of thing that gets them to stop.
Among the swing, it might even be, a net positive in a lot of ways, because people do buy. There is the impulse, as wrong as it is for all of us, libertarians and classical liberals, there is the impulse that when Australians don't like something, they ban it, right? People are marching, that's terrible, ban it. The complexities of having to defend speech you don't like as well as speech you like, that's lost on Australians who, we can't even bloody vape in this country legally anymore, to the extent other countries do. Well, unless you're crooked or you get a script or something. Australians love banning things. So I think in our bubble, we don't like this hate speech stuff. I'm not quite sure that washes for large sections of the middle, but again, it depends. There is a suspicion of political correctness though, and of wokeness. So maybe that feeds into it too. I don't know, but I don't think
it's going to move the needle. I don't think it'll move the needle for the swing voters that much. It hurts them with the base. I think they miscalculated, thinking that, as you say before, the brand capital that the coalition has normally is good economic manager. They're losing that. They need to do something about that. And say security issues. And I think they thought if they banged the drum on this in the follow on from that Bondi massacre, that they could try and put security in the headlines and that would put them up in the polls. And they banged the drum so hard saying that we've got to do something. And the Labor said, here's something stupid to do.
Yeah.
And then the Liberals felt, oh, well, we said we had to do something. They've given us something stupid to do. I guess we have to do it. It's
but this is what happens. Sorry, I have to weigh in on this again. Being Jewish myself, and theoretically somebody these stupid laws are designed to protect. You cannot solve a cultural problem with a regulatory solution. It doesn't work that way. You can't just will things away with legislation all the time. And if you try, you get ham-fisted completely. I mean, the bill that they end up with protects radical imams more than it hinders them in a lot of their activities. So, yeah.
Yes, their mentality is such that they pass a law saying it's compulsory to love the Jews, and they would think, oh, okay, well, we passed the law. I guess that means that the National Socialist Network now loves the Jews. It's You're quite right. You can't mandate.
And you can't. And again, a lot of people, leaders of my community, may not find this a particularly nice notion to say out loud, but not everybody's going to like us. As long as they don't shoot us or harm us in any way. I mean, you can't. As you said, you can't make people like you. Not everybody has good taste.
And that shouldn't be the standard. That shouldn't be the standard. I mean, people forget. I think one of the great virtues of sort of Anglo culture and Dutch culture, for that matter, I'll let them in on this, is the word tolerance. And people have misunderstood that word. It doesn't mean you like everyone. It means you put up with people even when you don't like them. You don't tolerate things you like. That makes no sense. Like, I don't tolerate this Scotch.
There was a South Park
I like
episode along those lines. Yeah.
So tolerance is a virtue, but it's not what people think it is. You're allowed to hate someone as long as you tolerate them. That's a different thing to embracing them. And that applies to a lot of things in life. For a lot of the sort of lefty movements where the left and libertarians sort of started walking in the same direction, but for very different reasons. We were doing it for tolerance, and they were doing it for mandated love of a quirky, weird minority group or whatever it is. And it's
one more
come
thought,
back to show the difference.
One more thought on Susan Lee's brilliant political strategy post Bondi. I mean, the irony of it all is that all that Bondi stuff really just served to drive people to One Nation. I mean, that's when it really took off. And firstly, we have the polling to indicate that, but also I personally, because everyone knows I've got a political background, I've lost count of the number of people since Bondi who've just completely flat. Deadpanned. I'm voting One Nation now. Yep, I'm with One Nation. And people you'd never expect. GPs, Jewish grandmas. Every a very diverse coalition of people are now flocking to One Nation. Bondi changed everything.
Yeah, I've heard people describe that as the turning point. I'm not sure I see it as that stark in the polls. They seem to be growing pretty consistently. Over a series of months. That got it going. Well, I think it was going before then, but maybe that was a trigger point. I don't know. It's the narrative is certainly strong anyway, but it was probably part of it.
I think the difference is also Pauline was the did stand out as the only politician who actually was able to point to what the problem was, which is radical Islamic terrorism. Everybody else minced their words. Anthony Albanese was flailing around talking about gun reform or some goddamn thing. So yeah.
No, that's very true. And she managed to walk the line where she saw the Bondi massacre. She pointed to the issue of radical Islam and then didn't support the anti-speech laws. And I think that being able to say both of those things at the same time is probably what really helped boost her. So I know, Gene, you have to duck off a bit earlier than usual, and we haven't got to the sort of newsletter topic of the week section. So, gents, with your indulgence, feel free to segue back to whatever you were hoping to say anyway. But this week in ATA's newsletter, we discuss the issue of family tax and income splitting. If you don't yet get our newsletter, you should have got the email this morning, hopefully. If you haven't got it yet, please make sure you go to oztaxpayers.substack.com and sign up. You'll sign up for free. Look, you can also give us money if you like. If you give us money, you get basically no extra benefits except for helping us keep the lights on. So I hope you will consider doing that if you've got the spare pennies. It's a couple of bucks a month. It's very much appreciated. But if you don't want to give us money, just go and sign up for free. And that way you can get involved in the conversation, in the discussion, and help us push the campaigns we're pushing. This week, the email you would have received or should have received once you sign up was about family tax issues. And this was put back on the agenda by two politicians who both put out policy ideas in the last week. One was Matt Canavan, and it's not a new policy idea from Matt Canavan. He's pushed this since his maiden speech more than 10 years ago when he entered Parliament. And that was the idea of income splitting. Now, if you haven't heard of income splitting before, the basic idea, so I've got to describe the problem first and then describe how income splitting is the solution to it. A family, so it's like two parents, two kids, just a sort of a cliche, boring picture of a family. If they're earning, and I'm making these numbers simple and rounded so I can do it on the fly. If they earn a family income of $200,000 because both parents earn $100,000 each, they would end up paying tax, I think, in the order of $45,000 a year. All right. If another family, still two parents, two kids, still a total family income of $200,000, but they get that $200,000 because one primary earner earns $200,000 and the other one earns $0. Now that family earns the same total amount of income, but they pay tax in the order of, I think, $56,000, $57,000 a year. So you see like $12,000 a year more tax for the family that has one income vis-a-vis the family that splits the income between two parents. So the way to address this issue in most developed countries in the world, and this really is very common around the world, is some amount of either allowing the family to split the income between them, so to recreate the situation with two people earning 100,000, or at least some amount of income splitting. There's lots of countries where they allow partial income splitting, or alternatively allowing people to file joint family tax returns, which functionally achieves roughly the same thing. It achieves partial income splitting in most instances. So some sort of version of family tax is how most countries do it. Australia is one of, I think, only 4 OECD countries that has a purely individual-based income tax system. And that means our tax system really doesn't do great for families where the parents don't earn exactly the same income. And let's be honest, there's a lot of families where the two partners don't earn exactly the same income, right? So there's quite a strong bias against families where one of the parents wants to spend more time with their kids. All right, we've got this anti-family bias built in. Now, one very legitimate response to that is that, well, the tax system, the government should treat everyone as individuals. They should just treat them as individuals consistently across the board, the end, full stop. And there is some merit to that argument, except for it to hold, the government would need to do that consistently. And here's the rub. The tax and welfare systems interact. And in the welfare system, they treat you as a family group. And what they do is, if you are in a family, they penalize you. And then as soon as you go to the tax system, they go, oh, now if we treated you as a family, it would end up being more generous. So no, we're going to take that away now. All right. So I would argue, be consistent. Either treat everyone as individuals, both in the tax and welfare system, or treat everyone as families, both in the tax and welfare system. That would be a consistent approach. Instead, we've got in both systems, they picked the anti-family approach. The anti-family approach in welfare and the anti-family approach in tax. So I'd say pick one of each. That would be the neutral. I mean, if you really wanted to go pro-natalist, you'd pick pro-family in both instances. But I think a neutral policy would be to be consistent, at least. And I'd say the more obvious way to be consistent is allow family tax the same as you treat families as a combined unit for welfare. That would be a consistent approach. So the idea of income splitting is not, as is sometimes accused, introducing an arbitrary pro-family bias. It is, I would argue, removing the existing arbitrary anti-family bias that is already embedded in our tax welfare system. And it is rebalancing for that reason. So this is the idea of income splitting. The idea has been around for a long time. I think that Joe Bjelke-Petersen, Joe for PM, I think he pushed the idea. Lots of people have pushed the idea through a long time. It's already policy for One Nation, for the Libertarians, for Family First, for People First, right? So it is an idea that's out there and discussed. And it's not new to this week for Matt Canavan. It's not like he just discovered it and stole the idea from One Nation or anyone else. He's been pushing it forever. But it's an idea that's been around for a long time. Major parties have shied away from it for primarily three reasons, I'd say. One is they say, well, we just can't afford it. And I would say that is a weak argument. It's a shallow argument. We are overtaxed. People are already paying far too much tax. If we can't afford it, then we need to cut back on government spending, get the spending under control so we can get the tax down. It is, according to the PBO, it costs about $6 billion a year. It goes up over time, but when you introduce it, $6 billion, which would be manageable for a thoughtful government to be able to find more than $6 billion worth of savings in our budget. Right? Our budget is quite big. There is more than $6 billion that can be taken out of it responsibly. So I think that it's a weak sort of argument to dodge it. It is something worth doing. It could be afforded by a responsible government who's willing to trim spending. The next argument against it is kind of what we were saying before. People say it's creating a bias towards this bygone era of a traditional family where one person works more than the other and one person spends time with their kids. And two things to that. One is it doesn't create the bias. It takes away the bias against it. So that's what I was saying before. And the other one is it's not obvious to me that we should be hating on families where one of the parents decides to spend more time with their kids. I mean, it's the current anti-tax bias of our tax system seems to be based on the idea that the ideal way to live life is to spend as much time as possible in the workforce and hand your kids over to a stranger and get the stranger to raise your kids. Now, fine, if that's what you want to do, I don't think there should be a bias against you for doing that. But I don't think there should be a bias against people who decide, you know what, the purpose of life is something more than just making widgets. One of us would like to spend a bit more time with our kids. I think that is a perfectly legitimate, indeed admirable life choice. And I don't think we should have a tax system that is biased against such people. And I think we shouldn't be scared of saying that, no, that's too old-fashioned or bygone era. I think there's a lot of families out there where one of the parents would love to spend more time with their kids. I think a lot of parents actually do like their kids. And this getting up participation rates is so that you can say, oh, look at what the GDP number did. I don't think families are as interested in that as they are in watching their kids play sport and spending time with them in the backyard and what have you. So I think there's some legs to that. I can't remember the third argument people use against it, but I'm sure it will come to me as we go forward. I should have written it down. This is the problem with doing this stuff off the top of your head here.
Well, it's an equity argument. Have you made the equity argument, John?
That is exactly.
That's the main argument I'd make for it. But go ahead if you want to.
So one argument against it is that the benefits, most of the a larger benefit can go to higher income families. So there's two arguments in responses to that. One is, I think it's just mostly not true. Secondly, there are ways to tweak the system so that it isn't true, even if you thought it was. The reason it's mostly not true is Australia, there is already a way for people who have capital income, which is mostly rich people, to do income splitting, which is you and your partner both own a company. And you can just both get dividends from the company. Or the more common way of doing it is you own a company or a business, and that is owned by a family trust. And the family trust distributes dividends to you. So basically, you don't need to understand how it works. Just know that wealthy people basically already have a way of income splitting. So the proposal to allow income splitting is a proposal to allow ordinary people to get the same benefit that rich people already get. It's a pro-equity measure. Allow normal people to get the same benefit rich people already get. But having said that, look, if you are worried about even the perception of accidentally helping rich people, which shows a lack of political courage, but if you are, there are ways to tweak the system. As I said before, a lot of the systems around the world, and remember, most developed countries have something like this, a lot of them are partial income splitting. And you can set up partial income splitting so as to not make it that too much benefit goes to the top end, such as a simple proposal that we put out last year by ATA, allow families to have a joint tax-free threshold of $50,000. So it's currently, they say it's 18.2. It's actually about 22,000 for an individual. But put that together and top it up. That would be a way to allow some amount of income splitting. And then because it's focused on the tax-free threshold, or maybe the tax-free threshold and just the first tax threshold, then you could make sure the runaway benefits aren't going to the top end. So there are ways of tweaking the system to avoid that critique if you're worried about that critique. But I would also argue, remember, the rich people can already do it through trusts and companies. And some people say, well, you've got to shut down the trusts. Yeah, if you shut down the trusts, they will just do it through the companies, right? Are we going to shut down companies?
Yes, all of them.
Okay, what do you say? Incorporation
might be a limited company gone. Everything must go.
Which brings me to, there was another politician who got involved in this family tax debate. So Matt Canavan has put income splitting back on the agenda. I think eminently affordable and appropriate reform, very worth discussing, and could be so we were talking before, like what could a coalition do to get the ball rolling again? I mean, unfortunately, One Nation already has the policy, so it's not a big point of differentiation, but that sort of thinking might help get people's attention again. There's another politician who's been talking tax, and I'm about to rip on her. So I want to start with caveating this and saying something a bit nice. So she is a teal independent, but the least bad teal independent, Allegra Spender. She's put out a tax paper that has some depth, that has some proper economics. It does largely correctly identify the problem, that workers are paying too much tax, that working people are having to take on the burden of too much welfare payment at the top end. Now, she embraces all the welfare payments, but she says we can't just continue to expect young people to keep paying ever more tax. Our income tax rates are too high, and she wants to cut back the income tax rates. Good, good economics, well argued, correctly identified the problem and wants to cut tax rates. I don't know if any other teal independent would actually get that many ticks, right? So, kudos to her there. Now, she does then say that she wants to make the system revenue neutral. To be fair, if it was the Greens or Labor or the other teals, they would want to raise extra revenue.
Yeah.
I believe it needs to be revenue negative. We need to cut tax. Tax is way too high. It needs to be cut.
Yeah.
She has gone the midway point between me and the Greens and said revenue neutral. So she has some income taxes cuts and she has some ways to raise revenue. So tax increases. And we can go through all of them later if you like, but one of them stuck out to me, which is that she basically wants to take away the ability to income split through companies and trusts. So it struck me that in the same week, Matt Canavan is saying, take this benefit, families are overtaxed, take this benefit and apply it to everyone. That the alternative tax idea doing the rounds and getting, feted and lauded as a wonderful idea by everyone in the National Press Club in the Canberra bubble was doing the exact opposite, saying take what little income splitting we already have and make that harder to do. So it sort of struck out to me that this is a fork in the road in tax policy and which way you want to walk. And it's very clear by the way I've framed it, which way I think we should walk. Matt Canavan's idea is the better way. But kudos to Allegra Spender to putting some policy detail on the paper. A lot of politicians just don't have the guts or intelligence to do that. And half her ideas were good. So I'm not picking on her too much, but I think her policy in this instance is wrong. She has underestimated the virtue of having a tax-friendly income tax, a family-friendly income tax system. And she's underestimated the fact that the size of the bias we've already got against families. And so I think she's on the wrong track there. But yes, this division in the road, two choices to make. I've rambled for a long time. Gideon, ramble back. What have I got right and wrong?
I'm going to duck off, guys. Sorry. Good to see you guys.
Oh, wait a second. And that's before you do then, Gene, and interrupt you, Gideon. Gene, what's your quick comment on that? And then I'll throw you out.
Look, I think there's too much of the demonization of particular. I think there's too. She's going after capital gains, isn't she? And negative gearing, if I remember correctly. And I think that's probably a bit chestnut. Excessive. So I think there's a concern there. But look, I think it's good she's done the analysis and she's identified some problems. But we really need to crack down on spending, cut that. But I'd be concerned about some of her measures. On the family tax thing, I mean, I think there's a good equity case for some income splitting because if you're in a household where there's just a sole earner and then there's a stay-at-home mum, then you've got to look after the whole household, haven't you, with your salary? I mean, it could be a stay-at-home dad, but of course, and so you're getting punished at that. If you're by those higher marginal tax rates, there's a good equity argument for allowing the income splitting, isn't there? Because you've got to look after this larger household. So I think there is a good equity argument for it. But I mean, equity's in the eye of the beholder. So we really can't analyze. It's hard to analyze that or debate about it economically, I'd say, John. We can come to different views on equity. That's my main contribution there.
All right, and before you go, you normally give a wrap up of the whole session. So your 1 minute synopsis of what we've covered today, and everything that Gideon has got wrong.
Well, we had a lot more discussion about Iran than I imagined. I thought that was fascinating. The whole regime change thing. I think it's ambitious. It'd be good if it could be achieved. I'm just not sure that Trump can achieve it.
He can do anything.
It'd be good to talk more about the directions that Canavan's going in. I think he's an interesting choice. I never expected Matt would win that ballot, but I can see why he has won it. He cuts through. He's a smart guy. He's an old friend of mine. I think he's a good choice for them. We have to see whether he can help push back against One Nation. I think he's right about. Some of the language coming out of One Nation, I think it's not helpful. So, let's see how he goes.
All right. Well, Gene, thank you as always for coming in and being the nice guy in the group. And
I got piled on today.
We've all disagreed with someone about something here, I think.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Good to see you, Gideon. Good to see you, John.
Jane.
All right.
Thanks,
guys.
All right.
All right, and then there were two.
Indeed. You were about to give me your wit and wisdom.
I lost your audio.
Have you still lost my audio?
I can't hear you, mate.
Hmm.
What's going on here?
Well, I think it's working. I can see it working on my end. If you're at home listening in, please let me know. I know. Yes. I know you can't hear me, Gideon. Try refreshing. Let me give him a message and see if he can try refreshing your headphones. If you're listening at home, who can you hear? Can you hear Gideon or me? I can hear you both. All right. There you go, Gideon. They can hear us both. We'll just have to write to each other. All right.
And we're back. Nope,
can you hear me this time?
Oh.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. Did you get that message?
Okay, they can hear us both. All right. I can't hear you. This is very surreal. All right. My take on income splitting is as follows. Look, I think it's brilliant. It's a no-brainer. We're always having this conversation. These lefties think tanks will come up with these prepositions. A lot of women do unpaid work. Women do more unpaid work than men. They're talking about domestic work, obviously. Now, you can't monetize domestic work. You can't monetize raising kids. It's the very opposite. It's an expenditure of resources. It's an absurd conversation. What you can do, though, is, yes, acknowledge the work done by the person who stays at home or works less and makes those sacrifices by allowing for those tax benefits and allowing that recognition in the amount of tax that we pay. And with that, I think that's it for me because I cannot hear a thing.
All right. I don't know if I can get you back, but it looks like it might not. So it might just be me going through some of the questions at the end on my own. I don't know if Gideon's going to try and fix that. I'll knock him down, bring him back up. I don't know if that does anything. Look, my sign language isn't good enough. I say I can't remember sign language, which actually does mean that, by the way. I learned that sentence. I'll just say goodbye to him then. You can't hear me.
All right. I'm out of here. Thanks, mate. Talk to you soon.
All right. Well, I will. Yes, thank you for coming in, Gideon. I know you can't hear me, but thank you for coming in. And we'll chat again soon. So, all right. Well, that just leaves you guys with me. So then there's no one to push back, reboot Gideon. Yes, we might want to reboot his computer, but if that fails, given his atrocious opinion about the Iran war, maybe we also just reboot Gideon. Now that he's not even here to defend himself, that is a low blow by me. So look, I don't see there being any pushback to anyone to bounce off income splitting. I don't know if anyone at home wants to chuck in a question or comment in the end, but what I might do is just quickly go through the comments that came in a little bit as we were going. There were some just comments from the earlier chat. We were talking about the difficult economic situation and how the government would deal with it. This is from the Iran situation. I don't know if that's likely. If they could, I think the amount of loyalty they show to Israel doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I just think, as a point of political reality, I doubt they'll do that. This is a good point about the capacity to do emergency services if the petrol runs low. Electrical ambulances, because of course everyone with an EV is going to do a little bit better in the coming months if we do have that petrol and diesel shortage. Rationing of fuel. Well, it may be coming. Look, I was not worried about this until recently. I started doing a bit of a deep dive into it, and hopefully the war winds down. Like, I think that's probably how things will go. Trump will declare a fake victory and we get out of the situation. And we have enough reserves to be able to get through until the new tankers start showing up. So, touch wood, inshallah, hopefully. But if this war drags on, if Iran keeps the Straits of Hormuz closed, we could be in for a bit of a nasty recession. So be warned, be pre-warned. Make whatever preparations you can just in case. And pray for peace, I guess. Some comments about Matt Canavan and the Liberals. Someone finding us unimpressive. I wish I knew what it was in response to. I think it might have been when we were talking about voluntary voting. But I don't know how to defend myself if I can't recall what the questions related to. You guys are going to have to be a little bit more specific if you want me to come back and address the questions at the end. An idea that's very worth considering. I would say, look, my variant of this would be citizen-initiated veto, so that legislation has to go through the lower house, go through the upper house, and then there is effectively a third house, which is the citizens, which if they raise enough signatures, they can take it to a referendum to then nullify that law. So I think that would be a way to have more citizen involvement in the legislative process without risking the situation they have in California, where referendums keep passing things that don't make sense with each other. Like the tax has to be below X, but the spending has to be above Y, and you have to balance the budget. And they've had referendums that require all of those things in various places in America, and it doesn't add up. Right, so that is a consideration. But citizens-initiated involvement somehow, I would say citizens-initiated vetoes on legislation would be a way to get the benefit of citizen involvement. I think this is in relation to voting. Australia is one of the few countries, we didn't invent lots of countries are democracies. I think it would be wrong to say that the UK people didn't fight for their love of their country and their democratic system, and the US didn't, and Canada didn't, and New Zealand didn't. Every other country is just failing their civic duty, and Australia and Brazil are the only places in the world that uphold their civic duty. Forcing people who don't care to walk into a booth, pick up a sausage, tick a random box, or just put in an empty piece of paper, I don't see any great civic virtue in that process. Give people the right to vote, but something you're forced to do is not a right. It's a mandate, and I think you should have a right to vote, but not a mandate. But happy to take the back and forth if you want to double down on the critique, Taylor. Yes, I think that's look. I think it ends up being this way. Unfortunately, I think I apologize on behalf of economists, because I think there is part of this idea that has gotten to the heads of many economists that increasing the participation rate is a good thing in and of itself. I don't think that's true. There is a correct participation rate. It's not always higher is better. right? There is a happy Goldilocks level, and I think too many people in the bureaucracy have got it into their head that if you increase the participation rate, it's always a good thing. And that means they want to be constant. And look at also, they just think all people need to increase the participation rate. Like underemployed youths that spend a lot of the time just playing video games, they probably need to increase their participation rate. But in situations where a family can have one person spending more time with their kids, increasing the participation rate means taking them away from their families to put them into a factory making widgets so they can drop off their kid at the child factory being looked after by people who aren't their families. It's which is, I make it sound very bad, and I don't mean to be too cruel about that. I'm just trying to paint a picture that it's not necessarily something the government should be engineering to make sure more kids drop off their kids and go to the factory. More parents drop off their kids and go to the factory. If you want to choose that, that's fine. But we shouldn't be biasing people towards that just to increase the bloody participation rate. There's no inherent virtue in participation. Yes, Dub, I think you've told us about this book before. Inflation, taxes, screwing housing, making women work to deflate pay, increase difficulties, and transport, immigration. Maybe I should look into the book. I've got to say, it is kind of easy to paint these conspiracy theories by just looking at what happened and then saying people intended it to happen. But, look, I shouldn't judge until I've read it. So I retract that comment. I'll go and read it first. Yes, indeed. I know it's very out of fashion these days. I've become very old-fashioned in my old age. This is an important comment, I think. The Allegra Spender plan. Look, I disagreed with her tax increases, or at least a couple of them. But I do want to give her credit because a lot of politicians don't even try. They don't engage in the policy debate. And I think we do need to give more credit to the people who try and get halfway there than the people who just use a couple of daft slogans, throw a bit of mud, and then just try to trick low information voters into supporting them. So I do want to give her credit there. And she has identified some of the problems. But I think more than my concern about her kind of anti-family tax increases, my broader concern is she's got some tax cuts and some tax increases. But her tax cuts will end up being temporary and her tax increases will end up being permanent. So that's my real concern about the Allegra Spender plan. And as you say here, if they consider the plan, they'll get the new taxes and leave the tax rates as they are. Well, no, if they did her plan, they would cut the tax rates to start with, but then bracket creep would unwind the benefit within a couple of years. And that's why I say her solution would bring down income taxes temporarily, but unless you index the tax thresholds, every income tax cut is temporary. So this is the trick. This is why the Howard's tax proposal of introducing the GST for income tax cuts wasn't as good as it sounded, because the income tax cuts were temporary. They were eaten away by bracket creep, but the GST was permanent. That's my same critique of Allegra Spender's, my meta critique of her tax proposal. Her tax cuts would be temporary. Her tax increases would be permanent. We need to index the tax thresholds before we think about doing any of these other trade-offs. So that's my meta critique of her. And I think most of the other comments now are about how you couldn't hear Gideon. Yes, well, I struggle to control who's listening along, but you can go back and check out the chat on the YouTube, on our podcast from last week on YouTube, and you'll see all the feisty back and forth. That was all right. Get into you to hurt. While you're not here to defend yourself, I've been ripping on your evil warmongering neocon ways, just a little bit. But well, that's interesting. An electric fire truck. But diesel goes with it for backup. Yeah, I love those pictures of electric cars being charged with a diesel generator. Look, for emergency services, that'd make some sense. We've got one petrol and one EV at our place. So it's if petrol becomes crazy, we can still get around. So we'll be able to be covered. So I'd heard some people had, some servos had even a lower ration. I thought it was 20 litres or $30 in some places. So yeah, it might be getting interesting. Look, I hope I'm jumping at shadows. I really do. And normally I'm the one sort of watering down the dramatic fear-mongering. But when I started looking into the amount of time it takes to be able to change direction, the short-term supply elasticity of fuels is remarkably low. And it might then mean a couple of months of pain. But absolutely, recall elections is another idea that I think its time has come. So that could be part of a broader political reform agenda about voluntary voting, recall elections, citizens-initiated referendum or citizens-initiated veto. Free speech referendum. I think, look, this is an idea that I helped put together for John Ruddock in the New South Wales Parliament, I think over a year ago. I think I wrote the speech for him. Or I should say I helped. So it's an idea that's been around. And I think that's the way to go. Some people push for a Bill of Rights. And I think the problem with a Bill of Rights is, of course, a bunch of bureaucrats will write them and they'll get all the rights wrong. Also, that debate about what's a right and what isn't will end up making the whole process unworkable. But if you just pick one right to start with, the right to free speech, the American First Amendment, and push that through first. If that can't get through, then no Bill of Rights can get through. And if it does get through, well, then you can move on to try to work out what right you want second. So, I think a free speech amendment to our Constitution is an idea that's time has come. So, Babbitt's free speech referendum apparently only got Antic to go along with it, which is a shame. That is a shame. That is surprising too. But Antic's a good man. He's politics would be worse for not having those rogue backbenchers on the scene. Okay, well, it seems we're in furious agreement once again, especially about that dodgy Gideon bastard. You still there, Gideon? Yes, Drew Pavlov's video about NDIS fraud. I mean, the NDIS spending is out of control. Within about 10 years, it'll be the largest single item in our budget. Look, I understand the problem with the fraud. I got to say, I think the problem is bigger than the fraud. And that's not to say I want to justify or excuse the fraud, but I worry sometimes that when we focus on the easy part of the argument, it means that if and when we win that part, everyone sort of walks off. Wipes their hand and walks off and says, the problem's done. The problem's not done. We have a system that incentivizes parents to find mental health problems with their children and gives them thousands of dollars if they can work out that their kid has now got autism or ADHD or PTSD or any other acronym you can think of. And if you can find a doctor that will confirm that your kid has some sort of problem, you get thousands of dollars. We homeschool our kids. My wife sometimes goes to new homeschool meetups. She chats with the other parents, and they're all just sitting there comparing the list of mental health problems their kid is officially diagnosed for and the NDIS benefits they get because of it. And we don't do that, so she feels a little bit left out of that game, and you feel a bit gypped. But that's not even rorting it. That is actually how the system works. If you pay people to have a mental health problem, you will get more people saying they have that mental health problem. It's a fundamental issue of incentives. There's no easy solution to this, but the first part of the solution is to point to the issue honestly, admit it's an issue. At some stage, we're going to have to work out, is subsidizing more mental health problems a good or bad thing for the country? It's certainly unsustainably expensive, and I'm not sure it's actually good for those kids to just grow up being told they have a whole list of acronyms after their name that make them weird. So I think that's maybe just a wrong policy track entirely. A lot more messages have come in since I've started reading through the messages. So I'm struggling to keep up to the end. Well, yes, that's a good point. Yes. So there'll be an erase. I guess it depends how big the deficits are between now and then. I meant program, though. I was talking about the program, the largest program. I mean, technically speaking, the largest program is handing over the GST to the states, but that doesn't count, right? That's a financial transaction. But yes, quite right. Interest payments. Well, as I mentioned before, I was working with John Ruddock in the New South Wales Parliament to push through some amendments. The first attempted amendment was the US First Amendment for free speech. The second attempt we took was the US Second Amendment for the right to bear arms. So there are people out there thinking in similar ways to you, Hannah. So this is talking about the daycare, I believe. Yeah, the other thing I think about this, that it's often considered in binary. It's either you're definitely going daycare or you're definitely... There are cases in the middle, right? And income splitting would allow people to have a bit more nuance in the way they do this. It would allow them to take a few more days off. We don't have to just think of this as binary on-off. It could be that someone currently is putting in their kids in daycare 4 days a week, and they would just love to be able to put their kids in 2 days a week instead. They'd love to be able to have that option if they were able to get their partner to work a little bit more and income split that with them to be able to keep their family income enough. They could take an extra 2 days off. There's lots of variations on the theme. And I don't think daycare should be seen as just a binary on-off thing. And it's just like having the grandparents over or a nanny or someone else. It doesn't have to be full-time one way or full-time the other. You can mix those things up. And most people do through history. And yet we seem to have a mentality that the only way to run the economy is to maximize full participation from every adult and have all kids go off to full-time sort of government-structured mini schools. So more part-time. More part-time would be good. I mean, to each their own. Your choice is your choice, but I think more part-time would be good. You're very welcome. Look, I have lost my partners in crime, so I think I'm going to wrap this up now. Just see the last few. Private health cover mentioned that heart surgery is the least of their concerns. Cost of mental health is the big one. Yes, well, I mean, you get in a lot of trouble for talking about this now because it's the theme is no one can talk about mental health, and it's really brave to come out and talk about it. What I find now is everyone talks about mental health, and it's brave to come out and say maybe we talk about it too much, which look, there is real mental health issues out there. It's not clear to me that having everybody just dwell and stew in their mental health problem is the best way of getting out of your mental health problem. And I note that there is something we have done in the last couple of decades that has spiked mental health problems, people on sort of, what are they? SSRIs? Yeah, that's it. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. SSRIs. Yeah. All of these people saying they're depressed, saying they're anxious, attempting suicide, on sort of drugged up. Something has gone on here. We are supposed to be in an age where we have maximized our empathy and our ability to deal with these issues, and we're all talking more and everyone has a guidance counselor. And at the same time, it's not clear that we're getting better outcomes. So just continuing to double down. You spend more, you get a bigger problem. You spend more, you get a bigger problem. And the solution is just to spend more. I don't know what the solution is, but at some stage we have to be able to have some blunt conversations and say that perhaps subsidizing the outcome you don't want isn't necessarily a way to improve society. I'll get in trouble for that, but I always got to get in trouble for something. Well, that is one way to get up the participation rate. Although again, well, what is it? It's late. No one's here to keep me on track, so I'll just say, look, I think child labor has a bad rap. Now, I don't necessarily mean sending 5-year-olds down coal mines, although they do have small hands, so they might be able to get some of the coal that other people can't. But the idea of getting kids to work, I don't give my kids pocket money. They have to run a business if they want to earn money, and we help them run businesses. So, it's all kind of still not a proper job. But the idea that kids could get some value from, I don't know, we had them picking up all the seaweed out of the dam the other day. They loved it. They did that for an hour, and we gave them a couple of dollars, and it was like a job. That's child labor. I don't think I'm making their life worse. I think it's probably teaching them good values, and I think they probably enjoyed themselves. But that is technically child labor, and I think we need to not allow these artificial pictures of a 5-year-old in a coal mine to have us throw out the baby with the bathwater with some of these concepts. Child labor could have its place. I can't remember what this is in response to with processed foods. We're not even talking about the dramatic drop in testosterone in sperm count in men, which I think is probably related to processed foods, but I don't know how. But I know what we said earlier that was that got you saying that. And the antibacterial. Oh, this is about the mental health problem. Mental health problem from processed foods, perhaps. Yes. That's and what is it? The xenoestrogens in the water, which goes to messing up our testosterone levels as well. It's 50% decrease in 50 years in testosterone levels. So if you see those memes online where it kind of indicates that men of the past were more men and men of today are more effeminate, it's not just a meme. You're actually noticing something that's showing up in the stats. It's been a 50% drop in testosterone in the average man over the last 50 years in the West. I think that might have something to do with the sort of foods we are eating and water we are drinking. Go play in cow poo and drink real milk. I don't know if that's even legal, is it, to drink real milk? But yeah, people used to just play in the dirt more often, and somehow they life wasn't over. Yeah, this is an interesting point. I think I've heard this critique before. I've got to say, I think the word individualism is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It's an overburdened word because it can be perceived two ways. I think it has to do with increased in atomization, I would call it. Because individualism can mean I respect the rights of individuals to be different, right? And that goes to the idea of like human rights and tolerance. Free speech is built on the idea of tolerating people saying something different to you. Freedom of association, most of the freedoms that, what I would argue, built the modern Anglo or Western world came from a respect of individual dignity. And if that's what people mean by individualism, I think that's a good thing. There is a separate thing, which is to say you need to shut yourself off, not be engaged with your community. And during the 19th century, we had the era of sort of political individualism, if that makes sense, like respect for individual dignity, the age of free markets and free speech and tolerance. And there was stronger communities than ever, stronger families and churches and communities. Yet the age of the friendly societies, which is one of my favorite topics about ways people used to get together in community groups to help each other. So you had very strong community bonds in an age of political individualism. And then we got to the 20th century and we saw a different track. And I would argue that it's in part kicked off by the welfare state, allowing people to opt out of community groups, decreasing the incentive to invest in families and community groups and churches when they're difficult. Because it's always easy to do things when it's easy. But you have to invest in things when they're difficult if you really want to make them work long term. And if you've just got a welfare check, you don't have to invest in that stupid community or family that you're stuck in. And I think that has led to an increase in atomization of people. So that's where the word individualism here could mean either of those things. One of which I think is a virtue. The other one I think is a vice, for lack of a better word. Okay, so we were meaning the same thing there, straying from faith, community, and families. And those are the three I put together. My version of this is about family, church, and community. And it doesn't have to be a church, right? It could be whatever religious version you have. But I come from a Christian culture, so church is the obvious one to say. Family, church, and community, like neighborhood groups. Those are the three things that historically always played the central bedrock of anyone's social life through all of human history until we created a world where you could shut the door, get on your phone, receive just a check in the mail and survive without other people. I'm not sure that's been a step in the right direction for mental health. So I think you make a good point there. And of course, it can be caused by more than one thing. So maybe it's a mix of everything. Processed foods, atomization, and the fact that we now encourage people, in my opinion, encouraging people to dwell on problems. Everyone faces problems, right? There's not a unique thing that the person going to the counselor is the only person with problems and everyone else in the world doesn't have them. Everyone has them. You can build resilience so that you can get through life with problems in a healthier way, or you can build fragility and then face the same problems, and they'll be much more shattering to your mental health and to your well-being. So maybe instead of getting people to dwell and wallow in the negativity, teach resilience to be able to deal with the negative parts of life that inevitably come your way. And this has now evolved from an economics and political chat to life counseling, which I'm not qualified for. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to wind this up, bring this to an end. Thank you, everyone who is listening along. Thank you to we've nearly just ticked over to 5,000. So I very much appreciate that, everyone. This is Death and Taxes, the live stream podcast from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. You can find us at taxpayers.org.au and on Substack at AusTaxpayers, AUSTaxpayers.substack.com. Please do go along to the Substack and sign up if you haven't already. It's 1 email a week. We do not spam you. We don't overburden you. But I think these are good conversation starters, and then there's a good chat on the Substack website. So please do go along and sign up there. It is free. If you are in a position to help us keep the lights on, that would also be very much appreciated. You can become a member of the ATA either on our website, taxpayers.org.au, or on the Substack. I've said the website enough now. You can find it in the show notes below. You can become a member on either of those places. There's lower tiers from a couple of dollars a month, so it doesn't break the bank, but it helps us to just keep ticking over here at the ATA, keep doing what we're doing, pushing things like income splitting and trying to reduce various taxes, charges, regulations, and silly government programs. So if you do have the spare money, please consider becoming a member. If you have a lot of money, please become a member at a higher level. If you don't have the spare money, that's fine. Please just follow us, check the website, follow us on the social medias, and follow us on Substack, because it'll be good to keep in touch and keep the conversation going. We do this every Thursday, 8:30 Sydney and Melbourne time, New South Wales and Victoria time, 7:30 Queensland time, and the other states should be able to work it out from there. I'm normally co-hosting with Jean, and then we have occasional guests such as Gideon today. We'll find out who we've got next week. I think we do have a guest lined up for next week, but I won't confirm it until I've got a confirm from that guest. So please do join us again next week. And until then, stay happy and stay free.